Professor Abdallah, are you a fan of Chinese movies?
No.
Capital no.
Yeah, absolutely no. I don't watch them. I
Okay,
only
can I
watch
ask?
Hollywood movies. Okay, I only watch action films, Hollywood films, and that's it. No Chinese, no all this kung fu stuff.
May I know why?
Z.
All right.
But really, I grew up with my own intellectual compass shaped by American films. When I was a small boy, my dad was giving me money to go and watch films in local households that they have TV. We didn't have a TV in our house until much later. So it is those films that shaped my preferences. Of course, they were showing Chinese films and Indian films, but I never like the storylines, all this jumping up and down, kicking everything, and so on. It doesn't make sense to me. But something like Star Trek fires my imagination, and it is something that I really love. Mission Impossible, you know, storefront lawyers, all those TV shows of the United States in the 60s and the 70s helped to shape my understanding of popular culture. And I'd always been towards the West, not to the East. So
That
uh,
explains why you. That explains why you are liberal.
yeah, well, that's right. It explains, but it's not. My liberalism came from my dad, who was extremely. He was a writer himself,
Mhm.
a historian, and so he was a liberal person, and he never censored what we are going to watch. Never. He was giving me money
Never.
to buy books. Never. He never censored what to watch, what to read, or what to listen to. He never did. You want to listen to it? It's up to you. The moral judgment is up to you to decide. And I formed my own moral compass based on my environment and my own perception of what is good and what is bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very much curious about this issue before I ask you about the popularity of the Chinese movies here in northern Nigeria as a researcher. I once had an interview with a professor called Professor Roger Stahl from University of Georgia in the United States of America. His primary interest is the relationship between DoD, the Department of Defense, and the Hollywood film industries. And in that more than 1 hour interview, we talked a lot about how the US government, through CIA and DoD, influence not only the themes of the movies and TV shows, but also even the script there. One interesting thing we talked about in that interview was Mission Impossible. Professor Abdullah talked about it. Mission Impossible, as documented by researchers like him, Professor Roger Stahl and Tricia Jenkins, and so on and so forth, like Mission Impossible, just like 24 of Jack Bauer, Kiefer Sutherland, was heavily supported and funded by the CIA. So, Professor Abdullah, your thinking, your ideologies, I don't want to say ideologies, your perceptions have been shaped by what other people would call US propaganda from those movies. And are you proud of that?
Yeah, and nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's a
You
propaganda anyway, and I don't think anything wrong with the so-called U.S. propaganda. I like Mission Impossible. In fact, I'm looking forward to Mission Impossible 7 coming out in a couple of weeks or so. That does not mean that I'm a spy or I like being a spy or I can rat
I'm not
out
saying
on my
that.
people. No, no, no. What your audiences might think, oh, he's one of them. See, the problem is, in my case, particularly as a child growing up in the heart of the city, we always had Americans visiting our houses. My father was a friend of BSO volunteers, volunteer services overseas, volunteer corps, peace corps, and all that. My father was a local historian, and therefore a lot of all these Americans used to come to him for suggestions, for advice. He was a gatekeeper. So I grew up with a lot of visitors coming into our house, British, American, and so on. That's one of them gave me a guitar. And I can't imagine any local researcher giving a young kid, a just 13-year-old boy, a guitar. But there you are. I had it. And my father, in fact, it was my father who delivered it to me. Now, he didn't say, oh, no, you shouldn't be playing a guitar. It's wrong. It's bad. It's a wrong instrument. No, he is the one who delivered the message to me, together with books like Profiles on Courage and so on and so forth. And he has been encouraging me, and I watched it, and I am aware, very, very well aware, that there is all this spy DOD thing about the films that you see, because the way American films glorify the United States government, like Navy SEALs, the Marine Corps, and all that in their films. It is very clear that there is some kind of intervention, official intervention, in the way Navy SEALs, Marines, and so on were being promoted. That doesn't bother me. I never felt like I want to become a Marine or I want to become a Navy SEAL or anything. But I think it's very good that the American government, through Hollywood, is doing all it can in order to protect its strength, its power, and at the same time also its ideology, which I think that's what films are all about, ideology, okay? Whether it's individual or whether it's dealing with a corporate level. So I don't have much of a problem with all that. At least there's a focus, there's a direction. And they are dealing with global theater. There's a war going on the planet, and they are dealing with how to handle this thing, and they're giving you probably tips and ideas on how they win their own wars. It's all about self-aggrandizement, about Americanism, about saying Americans are the superb and so on. Well, if people don't like it, they can also make their own films about saying their own countries are superb and all that. Okay.
And so there's a lot to learn from the Americans. Forget about the propaganda.
Oh, we are learning about world security, about weapons, you know, about tactics, about strategies, about everything. I mean, they're teaching all these things. Now, whether that is good or bad is something else, okay? But it is their country, they're defending it, and therefore they are promoting how they defend their country and how they are willing to go all lengths in order to protect their country. And I don't think that's something that is really bad.
Yeah, briefly, Professor Chris Berry, are the Chinese films popular in the West, especially in Europe?
Well, before I answer that, I'd like to just respond a little bit to what Professor Abdallah was saying, because I think I'd like to add something, which is that I think in addition, we need to be aware, be conscious of the different ways in which the government and the industry relate to each other in different places, right? So in the United States, for example, Mission Impossible, the reason a film like Mission Impossible has to cooperate with the US government, including the CIA, is because it's a film all about the military, and to have that access and to get the ability to work with the equipment and everything else, and to see the weaponry, they need to cooperate with the government. But the industry and the government remain separate entities, related but separate. And there is no direct requirement, for example, for Hollywood filmmakers to submit their scripts to the American government for approval. And indeed, as we know, many American films deal with very contentious issues in the US. In China, on the other hand, there is a situation where Chinese filmmakers do have to submit their scripts to the government. And the Chinese believe in their system of control. It's not just because they're doing it for the sake of it. They believe in a more unified consensus, if you will, and control-based industry. So I just wanted to say that first. It's a different mechanism, which does ensure that not necessarily the scripts are all government propaganda, but at least that they have to be government approved before they're filmed.
In a simple term, can we get something straight and clear here? Do you believe, or don't you believe, that the scripts get altered and changed by the US government?
No, they don't. No, I mean, you mean scripts of every Hollywood movie?
Not every, some of those movies, like Mission Impossible 24, produced by Fox.
So in a situation like that, where you'll have the Fox presumably are having to go to the US military and say, we need your cooperation to make the movie. The US military is saying, okay, well, we need to see the script. And then no doubt there is negotiation and there are changes that happen, I'm sure. In the same way that, I don't know, you want to go shoot in Yellowstone Park, or you want to go get McDonald's Corporation to let you make a movie in their restaurants, they're going to say, well, we want to see the script and we want to have a negotiation because we don't want you to do this or we don't want you to do that. So yes, I'm sure in those particular cases, right? But that's quite different from a legal and structural setup that says you want to make a film in China, you want to release it in the Chinese movie theaters. Before you begin to shoot the film, the China Film Bureau, which is based in the propaganda department of the Chinese Communist Party, and that's what it's called, has to approve your script. Okay. Now, like I say, it doesn't mean every script is therefore a propaganda, script, but it has to be approved. Yeah.
Yeah. So do the European guys, the people of the West, like Chinese movies?
At the moment, I would say most Chinese films are not well known in the West. The Chinese film industry is extremely diverse. It's not just kung fu, which is a Hong Kong derived genre, but they make films in every genre you can think of, including sci-fi. So Star Trek fans will be happy to hear that, no doubt, but also art films, documentaries, everything. But right now, they're not getting a lot of play in Europe. I think historically that's been different, of course. So in the 70s and 80s, those Hong Kong commercial martial arts films were very popular. And in the 80s and 90s, for cinephiles, for people who liked art films, the mainland Chinese so-called fifth generation films, films by directors like Zhang Yimou, were very popular indeed. But these things go in cycles, and at the moment, there's not much Chinese film making its way either into the mainstream market or into the more indie art house market in Europe. No.
So in a simple term, they're not popular in the West due to some reasons.
No, they're not.
Yeah, Professor Abdallah, are the Chinese movies and films popular here in Nigeria, especially in the north?
No, they are not.
Why?
Simply like what he said, they tend to be so restricted to their own cultural milieu and all this business of kung fu, jumping up and down and kicking doors and things like that. Looked a little bit silly. Maybe it reflects a particular philosophy, but it is not something that is realistic. People like to see action films, and now thanks to YouTube and all this Netflix and things like that, they are watching series films, like Pubar, like Anna, all these action films that are still, of course, back to the spooky stuff kind of thing, the CIA, FBI kind of thing. But that's what entertains people. That's what they like about it. Most people were able to filter out the ideological messages in these American movies. They focus attention on the action and the cinematography. But Chinese films in the 60s, when the film industry, the 70s, sorry, when the film industry was being developed in northern Nigeria, there are some kung fu enthusiasts who had a club about kung fu and things like that. And some of these kung fu activities were recorded and shown on the local TV without really much of a storyline. And I think one of the actors was called Muazzam Boss. You may wish to talk to him much later about this, because they are the ones who come up with all this. They had a strip of cloth, black strip of cloth, and they like to believe that they are black belts or something like that. But they're jumping up and down, kicking things all over the place. And it looks so wonderful, so fascinating within the context of Bruce Lee films, because Bruce Lee, Enter the Dragon and all that were really popular for a period. And people like all this high kicking and so on. But then they became the same films over and over and over again. But Muazzam Boss and his colleagues also started mimicking all those Hong Kong or Chinese or whatever it is moves.
Yeah.
And the State Department didn't like it. The security agencies in Kano stepped in and prevented them from continuing, because they said, and this is very interesting, they said that by doing all those kung fu stuff, they are providing scripts for young people on how to become violent. So here in northern Nigeria, the link between media effect and its effect is very strong. People see that media provides a template for copyable or behavior that young people might copy. So when you show a young person, if you saw a Chinese person jumping up and down all over the place, that's okay. He is the other. All right. This is something that's going to happen here. It won't happen here. He is the other. But when you saw a young local person speaking local language, and jumping up and down, all this, that, all sort of things. Then you can say, well, this person is capable of giving a template for other people like him to copy. And so they stopped it. And that was the end of that. But otherwise, the popularity of Chinese films in northern Nigeria was basically on mainly on Bruce Lee. Then later on, Jackie Chan came on. But then Jackie Chan was not really Chinese films. I mean, maybe Bruce Lee was Chinese film, dealing with Chinese ideology and things, just like American films deal with
martial
American
arts.
ideology. Yes, but Jackie Chan's film were like comedy, action comedy, and it's all about really Americanism,
Yes.
and saving the world and so on and so forth. Things that are innocuous, that are not based on ideology. So that's the first thing. Secondly, Chinese films tend to be ideological. And in the 60s here in northern Nigeria, there was all this business of communism and so on and so forth. A very popular party in Kano, People's Redemption Party, had a loosely communist ideology on it. And people tend to run away from anything that is tainted with communism because they believe communists are godless. They don't have any passion for Islam and religion and so on. And Islam here in Kano has been a persistent public process since 1349. So you could imagine this is an old sultanate in Islam, and then you are coming now with all this communism and other ideologies, and they didn't like it. They like American films because more or less indifferent towards them. I don't think there was anybody who says we shouldn't copy American films. But when Indian films came along, that was the hallelujah moment, as it were. I mean, oh, this is fantastic. Everybody loves Indian films, including censors. Those who are saying you shouldn't watch other films. But they like Indian films because of the singing, dancing, and then all the jewelry and the beautiful women, and that they believe that Indian films are just reflecting society similar to their own. Yes. That the Indians are just like them in dress, in habit, in social culture, of obedient to parents and so on. I mean, you see an Indian guy going down to his mother's feet and begging for forgiveness or something like that, which is what Islam promotes. So Chinese films, to the best of my knowledge, were not all that popular. They are covered in a niche market. Only people who like martial arts and things like that actually watch them, but they are not on a large-scale popular thing. But what was popular was American films. Whether people believe American films are bad, are filthy, and things like that, they were popular. People like them, they watch them. And when YouTube came along, and some of these films were being uploaded to YouTube, people were going there to download them. When Netflix also came along, people were going there to watch them. And then DSTV, again, another streaming service came along, and people were subscribing and watching them. You can't control all that. So I think what we always talk about here in northern Nigeria is that censorship of the film industry is not the answer. If you don't want people to copy bad things or to do bad things, it is their hearts and minds that you control. Just like Anthony Giddens said, it's about agency. It's about your own moral compass, not about what you should watch or you shouldn't watch. And like in China, for instance, where you have to pass your script through all this propaganda unit for them to say this is good, you are portraying a good behavior or something like that. But here in Kano, at the moment, I think the American TV series, what people are watching, like The Equalizer. I mean, everybody is looking forward to the last episode of Equalizer so that they can see what happened. You know, I know
you also are looking forward to it. You also are looking forward to it.
I want to see how it ended up because they are renewing it for a fourth season. So we just want to know how it ended. So, but that is it.
Yeah,
I'm 67 years old. So I've been in this system for the whole of my life. And I cannot really say that there is a popularity of Chinese films. If there is, it is a niche market. Very few individuals doing that. But that was killed in the 70s when Muazzam Bosch and his colleagues started copying Kung Fu moves. And, people thought that they were given a very... Yeah, in fact, it was the security agents who went to them and stopped them from continuing their activities and saying that you are now showing people how to fight. So this, of course, brings to mind media effects theory. Does the media really influence our behavior or not? And that is the debate that is going on here in northern Nigeria.
Yeah, of course. Professor Chris Berry, I'm sure you would like to add something upon what Professor Abdallah has said. But let me put to you the words of someone that I talked to yesterday. I told him that I understand that almost every single Hausa-speaking radio stations that we have in northern Nigeria has programs related to Bollywood films, but not even Hollywood or Chinese, let alone Chinese movies, get that amount of coverage. This is also an issue in the West. I said, why? He said, the reason why Bollywood films are more popular than Chinese films and even Hollywood films in terms of journalistic coverage is because, number one, he says, and I quote, almost every household knows the name of the Bollywood artists. He continues to say, they know the names of the actors, they know the names of the actresses. He also says, even some technicians are popular in Nigeria. For example, directors, musicians, and singers. He continues to say, finally, but hardly anyone knows about Chinese directors. Even their actors are not popular here. This guy is called Bello Muhammad King Khan. This is to show you how influential Bollywood films are in northern Nigeria. People are attaching their names to the names of Bollywood celebrities. I heard a guy called Shaibu Arjun. Another can Another guy is Abdul Salman Khan. In fact, this Abdul Salman Khan is a journalist, of course, working for Freedom Radio. He even worked for DW Hausa in Germany. But he has his full name is Abdul Karim Muhammad Abdul Karim. But now his popular name is Abdul Salman Khan. Look at this. This guy Bella King Khan, named after Shah Rukh Khan, the king of Bollywood, as they refer him to. Professor Chris Berry, this is something very interesting.
Well, I think, yes, it certainly is. And it's well known that Bollywood film is very popular in many countries in Africa and has a long history there. I think that, for anything, there are lots of, there is never one single reason why something happens, right? There are a number of things that come together and make them happen. And I think for me, a big question, I don't know much about Bollywood, but for me, a big question would be, how does Bollywood film spread in Africa? What are the structures that make it spread? And I wonder, how important has the music been as a kind of vanguard, right? For the songs are a way that the performers and the stars get known first, and then people want to go to see the movie because they know that star or that song is in that movie. And because Chinese films are actually more like Hollywood films in terms of being dramas that are more or less realist, they're not song and dance films like the Bollywood movies. You don't have that way to use radio and other, to Spotify and all the rest of it to get the songs known first. You don't have that mechanism. Next